Curling now enters the Sports Weekend spotlight.
Now it's hot stove time. We always love this because there's some hot topics.
It is hot stove time, and we call them the curling reporters of Canada.
They also sing well and play the guitar
at the karaoke
and
the guitar, absolutely. And they sit in the front row of the media bench at the SaskTel Center, and all of them are here. We have Jason Bell, Greg Strong, Ted Wyman. Of course, they're hard at it at the arena. Why don't we go to you, Ted, first? What sticks out to you, Ted, because it's been a roller coaster so far?
Well, obviously, Devin, the thing that sticks out most is just what happened today, and that's that, Kerri Einarson loses a huge game, and we end up with tiebreakers. I know how much you love them, Devin, so it's pretty going to make it for a pretty exciting last couple of days here as we have all kinds of teams still in the mix. And, of course, on the men's side, you've seen just this absolute emergence to the top from Brad Gushue and Brad Jacobs, who've been two of the best all along, and they're looking like they're going to battle it out again.
Jason, what about that showdown that Kerri had, and if she wins, she's in, and instead there's this whole series of tiebreakers? What is it? Are you already looking at maybe a 4-4 team might emerge and beat an 8-0 team in the final? Do you think that's a possibility?
Well, first, I want to know why Ted looks like he has tans, and I'm anemic. I don't get this. I look like I haven't been in the sun. I haven't been in the sun in ages. but I have to be honest. I did do something that you're never supposed to do as a reporter. I wrote my lead in the first end that this was going to be the Manitoba Trifecta, and massive jinx move for Kerri. She's probably cursed right now. But, we just talked about this, how a team could go 8-0 and potentially have one bad end, Colleen, on Sunday and lose an opportunity to go to Beijing to a team that's got 4 losses. And I guess on the surface, that just seems like crazy, but that's the situation we now find ourselves in. And you wonder if the team that gets rolling tomorrow and maybe gets hot and knocks over Jennifer Jones in the semifinal continues that role the very next morning against a Fleury team that might like the rest, but then you also wonder how they're going to respond to that long layoff off the ice.
Greg, what do you make of the curling? Colleen and I have talked about the fact that there have maybe been at most a handful of games that were really riveting, but outside of that, we saw a lot of blowouts.
Well, there were a lot of riveting games, but then it always seemed like 2 games always finished earlier, where you knew it was over early.
Yeah, it's great to be on with all of you again and see you live here in this setting, live curling. And, we were chatting about this the other day.
True.
How the last time we were all together covering a spiel, it was the Brier in Kingston 18 months ago or whatever it was. And the curling was incredible. It was like a main storyline, was just how strong it was. This trials experience has not been that good. And certainly the pandemic has been a factor there. But there have only been really a handful of draws where we have seen top shelf curling. Not for lack of effort, it just hasn't been there. And today, this afternoon, was really a really interesting draw, but that has been the rarity, I'd say, so far here at the trials.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Let's go ahead to the men's draw, and Ted, let's begin with you. There is still some drama on the men's side, isn't there? Especially because of the Gushue-McEwen game and the ramifications of Jacobs and Horgan, and maybe first place on the line, depending on what happens there.
Well, absolutely. That's a game where both teams have an awful lot on the line, because Gushue can clinch first place if he gets that win and a bye to the final, and I'm sure he wants that. And Mike McEwen is not completely out of this thing. He's not in great shape because he needs a Kevin Cooey loss to John Epping, but should that happen, and we just saw Kerri Einarson lose in a similar situation on the afternoon draw, then perhaps Mike McEwen still can get into a tiebreaker. So expecting a barn burner. I love the fact, I covered Mike McEwen when I was a reporter at the Brandon Sun back in the 90s, and he was a junior, and he was clashing with Brad Gushue then as well. And here we are all these years later, and they're doing it again. with a chance, potentially to get to the Olympics on the line down here. So it's just years and years and years of great rivalry, and we get to see it again tonight.
Jay, what do you make of what's going to happen? Ted set it up beautifully. What do you make? Sorry, Greg. Do you want to jump in and then we can go to Jay? Go ahead, Greg, and then we'll go over to Jay.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I was just keen to mention that one interesting storyline that has developed here is that with the tiebreaker scenario that's on tap tomorrow, we're going to have 2 evening semifinals tomorrow night. And a big question is, who's going to be on TV? Obviously, they'll show the highlights of the other semifinal throughout that game, but what's going to be the feature game? Interesting question, and I think they'll wait until this evening's draw to see which is the better matchup, but that's an interesting decision, and one that TSN has yet to answer. It put out some emails and texts to some TSN folks. Haven't heard yet what their plan is on that.
That is a good point.
That is a very good point.
Yeah. Okay, Jay, did you already write the lead on this about a Manitoba Trifecta or something similar on the men's side? You didn't jinx anything there.
Got a blank slate right now, so we've got a lot of work to do at deadline tonight. And Mike McEwen has had a habit of bouncing back this week, so we'll have to see. But Brad Gushue they look rock solid, obviously, and that's going to be a real tough test for them. And he's lost the control of his own destiny, as they say, that great cliche, because he has to be worried about Kevin Cooey as well. And you anticipate Kevin Cooey losing tonight? I certainly don't, and I think the 2 Brads and Kevin Cooey were maybe what most of us would have picked for the 3 left standing heading into the playoffs, and that could very well shake out. And I know all the Manitobans right now are spitting on their television sets at Jay Bell for saying that, but that's just kind of the way it looks to me.
How surprising is it, Greg, about who's not in it? Mostly Team Holman actually finishing last in the standings on the women's side, and Brier champ Brendan Botcher out of it as well. Is that a shocker?
Yeah, I was just going to say, who had Rachel Holman going 2-6, finishing last in these trials? I mean, it's really interesting. And also, I mean, with a lot of the teams now out of it, it's the new quad for a lot of them. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens over the coming days, weeks, as to where teams go from here. Could we see some lineup changes? We've seen in previous quads that it doesn't take long for, the foundation to be laid for other teams to kind of look ahead to the 26 games, but that will start soon.
How about a shout out, guys, to the Kelsey Rock team for coming in and winning here this afternoon against Kerri Einarson. I mean, they really threw a wrench into everything, and you could tell right from the night before, just the way that they were talking on social media, that it would really mean something to them to play spoiler and to have an effect on these standings, and they went out and did it. And there's a lot of teams thanking them right now. They're going to be owing them a beer.
Yeah,
that's a wonderful point, Ted, because you saw Scheidegger and the Rock team having a really nice moment after that game, and you can imagine what they were saying. Like you said, there are probably a few drinks and dinner to serve up as well. Yeah,
certainly never the same pressure on the team that's playing spoiler and the team like Einarson who has everything on the line. And
we should get predictions. We should get predictions from these guys.
Okay, let's start with Jay.
Jay Bell, you start predictions.
I'm writing them down.
Oh, what we think is going to happen the rest of the way, starting right now for both sides. You're writing this down, Colin.
Yep.
Good.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to. I think that, as I said before, I think the 2 Brads and Kevin Cooey are going to make the playoffs, and I'm changing my vote from the original part of the week. I said Brad Gushue, but Brad Jacobs looks like he is a man possessed. He's driven, and I think he'll make the much-awaited return to the Olympics on the men's side and on the women's team. On the women's side, it's been a bit of a shock to the system to see how well Tracy Fleury's group has handled this pressure. We can't say enough what kind of season they've had, but we keep wondering if maybe it's at some point the Cinderella story would come to an abrupt end, and it hasn't. So I'm also changing my original vote from Kerri Einarson to Tracy Fleury for some motivation.
I got teased a little bit by Ted
turn.
Wyman. Yeah, I got teased a little bit by Teddy there. We didn't like my Kristen McCarville pick early on, and it wasn't looking good. But it is back in play. Absolutely. So I'm sticking with Krista and Brad Gushue in the men's. Yeah. I mean, Krista,
All right.
there's no pressure
I
on her.
forgot you're bold.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'll give you
True.
credit, Greg. You had it from the
True.
very beginning, and you're sticking to it. And I'm going to stick to my original one as well. And of course, that's an easy one because I picked Tracy Fleury from the very beginning, and she's 8-0 through to here. Hasn't done anything to look like she's not going to win it. And I'll also stick with Kevin Cooey. I know he's going to be an awfully tough against the two Brads, assuming he even gets to the playoffs because he's still got some work to do. But the experience there is outstanding. John Morris, the addition to that team, makes them so incredibly good. And here's one thing, Devin and Colleen, that I wanted to bring up. If Kevin Cooey does make the final here, or make it into the playoffs, I should say, you're going to have 3 skips who've already been to the Olympics, and 9 of the 12 players on the ice in the playoffs will have already been to the Olympics. How much does experience count in this thing?
Counts.
Wow. Outstanding,
It counts
Ted.
at the
That's why
Olympic
we go
trials.
to all of you guys. You
So
are the
good.
pros. The band's back together, and more than anything, it's awesome to be in the same arena covering curling with all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys. We'll see you at the rink tonight.
Thanks,
care, guys.
guys.